My name is David Anthony Johnson, and it's a joy to be here worshiping with you today, this afternoon. I want to first thank our Lord Jesus Christ for giving us the health and strength and giving us the opportunity to be here today. So can we clap it up and say amen for our Lord Jesus Christ? Amen. 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 I want to thank Pastor Burmy for being so kind and for allowing me to be here. Thank you so very much for allowing me to have this opportunity. And I am also very, very grateful to Sister Barbara Edwards for being so good to me. I feel like she's an aunt to me now, you know. She's been so kind to me. And she's just said some very nice words and just the invitation, the hand of invitation. I'm humbled. Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. And everyone has been so friendly. So that's very good. You walk into God's house and you feel loved. So I just want to say thank you. So clap it up for yourselves, huh? Well, I have a lot to share with you. I'd like to talk to you about my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother, her name was Frankie Lenny Lee Perry. And her maiden name was Frankie Lenny Lee Williams. She was born in 1902, July 31st, 1902. She passed away in 1997. She was born in Brownsville, Tennessee. My great-grandfather, her husband, hoboed from Tennessee up to St. Louis, which is why we're from St. Louis. And my great-grandmother, my mother, and my aunt, they helped to raise me. My grandmother, my great-grandmother's daughter, passed away in 1959. I'm saying these dates for a reason, so just bear with me. And as I was growing up, my father was not in the home. He was a wealthy man living on the other side of town, but he was not in my life until I was about 14. So these women took it upon themselves, and my uncles, and the deacons and the deaconess in the church, to mentor me. But the one that I looked to the most was my great-grandmother, because I was always around my great-grandmother. She told me I was always in grown folks' business, that I need to be outside playing with the kids, and I did that. But there was something about my great-grandmother that I just loved. I loved the way that she would just sing as she was going around her chores. I would come in and I would help her. She didn't like to just mop the floor. She liked to get on her hands and knees and scrub the floor. So I would say, no, Mom, no, you're not going to do it. I'm going to do it. So every time she was doing some type of work, I had to do it for her because I loved her. Oh, I loved her. And she loved me too. So when all of my cousins and my siblings were out playing, I would be in there around my great-grandmother because I loved her stories. I wanted to hear about her stories, what it was like, because her father was a Tennessee slave. So when people talk about the slave narrative, it's very real to me because the very woman that raised me, her father was a slave. Frank Williams, born in 1857. He was 45 when my great-grandmother was born. She was 67 when I was born, 51 years ago. So it was very real to me, this slave narrative. He would tell her stories. She would tell me stories. She told me, David, whatever you do, you love the Lord thy God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Because, David, if you don't make it into the kingdom, I'm going to be standing in front of those pearly gates with a strap ready to whoop your butt. So you better make sure you make it in. I said, yes, ma'am. Oh, I love that lady, and I loved her stories. And how I knew it was story time was when she would get her rocking chair, tell me to scoot it up to the window. And she would look out over Lafayette Avenue, and then she would get her safety pin, not a bobby pin or or anything of that sort, or a toothpick, she would get a safety pin and pick her teeth. And I thought only people from Tennessee must do things like that. And she would go get it. And so I was sitting in my uncle's little smaller chair, and I would see what she was doing, and I would run and get a safety pin and try to do it, and blood is squirting out my gums. And she said, "Oh, baby, look at you. You're so silly." And then she would put it in my mouth and tell me that everything was going to be all right. From 6 months to 5 years old, I had convulsions, grand mal seizures. And my mother, being a teenager when she had me, she didn't know what was going on when she was changing my diaper. I started doing all these fits. My great-grandmother, "Calm down, calm down." She would tell my uncle, "Run the bath water cold, put some ice in it, put some apple cider vinegar in it, and we're gonna get them. We're gonna get them." And when I was old enough and had teeth, she told my uncle to take the spoon and turn it upside down and put it in my mouth so I wouldn't bite my tongue off. And then she would place me into the cold water and the apple cider vinegar, and I would come right out of it. So when my mother would take me to the hospital, the doctor would smell it. "Is there an old person in the house?" Because this is one of those remedies. But it worked. It worked. So when she would sit down, I knew it was story time, and I had to listen. Because she said, "I want you to learn these stories. And I want you to tell everybody about the love of God and how he worked through his children of all colors." So she would pick her teeth, and there was a story, and I'd watch her. And as she's picking her teeth, she said, "David, I want you to know we as a people, we could really sing, and we loved all sorts of music, from hymns to gospel songs to Negro spirituals." One of her favorite hymns was this song, "It Is Well With My Soul." Listen to the words. Say, yeah, yeah, when peace like a river attendeth my ways, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul. My sin, oh, the joy of this glorious thought. My sin not in part, but the whole. It is nailed to that cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, oh, my soul. It is well with my soul. my Lord shall descend, even so it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Yes, Lord. It is well. It is my soul. God be the glory. God be the glory. Is it well with your soul? Is it well with your soul? And then there was our love for gospel contemporary jazz. This next song is a prayer. Lord, cover me with your righteousness. I want to be covered. What about you? Hallelujah. Cover me, Lord. Yes, yes. Yes, Lord. Oh, cover me with righteousness. Cover me and count me with a blaze. Suffer me to come to thee and hide my nothingness. Cover me, O Lord, with your righteousness. I doubted. Cover me with your faith. And Lord, I've hated. Oh, yes, I have. I want you to cover Dave with your love, your sweet love. 'Cause I am wretched, I'm blind, I'm naked, and my best. Lord, won't you just cover me with your righteousness? Cover me. Oh, won't you cover me, Lord? of you want to be covered? How many of you want to be covered? Yes, I want to be covered from the crown of my head to the sole of my feet. My great-grandmother told me about how the black slave loved music, hymns, gospel music, but yet there was also another genre of music, the Negro spiritual. The Negro spiritual. And she said, David, I'm going to sing a couple of songs, and I'm going to be singing it for a reason, and I want you to figure out what I'm trying to say. And I said, yes, ma'am. So she started with, let us break bread together on our knees. Let us break bread together on our knees. When I fall on my knees with my face to the rising sun, oh Lord, have mercy on me. Then she go to another song. Gonna lay down my burdens down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down my burdens down by the riverside to study war no more. Well, I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Study war no more, my Lord. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. She came with another. Well, I'm on my way to the Canaan land. Yes, I'm on my way to the Canaan land. I'm on my way, Lord, to the Canaan land. Oh, yes, I'm on my way. Praise the good Lord. Said I'm on my way. Praise the good Lord. I'm on my way. Praise the good Lord. I'm on my way. Two more. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. My God's gonna trouble the water. Come on and wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. My God's gonna trouble the water. And the last song was her favorite. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Well, I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Coming for to carry me home, a band of angels coming after me, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing riding low, sweet chariot coming for to carry me home. She said, David, do you know why I sang those songs in that order? I said, no, ma'am. I was about 5 years old. I had my uncle's chair that he had since the 1940s, and I scooted it up next to her rocking chair, and as she was picking her teeth after she finished singing the song, after the finishing of Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, she picked up the safety pin and continued to pick her teeth. And I figured that safety pin was used to connect her memory, to something that had gone on in the past. So I was never mad at the safety pin now. And as she was thinking, she said, David, there were 3 Moseses, as she said in her Tennessee accent. There was 3 Moseses, boy. Do you know the first one? I said, yes, ma'am. The one who God used to free the Israelites, taking them out of the bondage of Egypt, through the Red Sea, into the wilderness, onto the promised land. She said, that's the first Moses. But there was a second Moses. I said, yes, ma'am. And that second Moses was a lady. Her name was Harriet Tubman. And this Moses also led her people from the bondage of slavery to the north for freedom. So David, but during that time, when she was doing the things she was doing, her selfless acts of love, because she had stolen away from the plantation. Still away home, I ain't got time to stay here. When she stole away from the plantation, from the Maryland plantation, up to Philadelphia to be free, she ran into the father of the Underground Railroad, William Steele. In the summertime, I had an opportunity to visit his home. Kiss the porch, because I said, man, if these steps could talk, what have they seen? Where he brought runaway slaves into his home and then fed them, gave them monies, gave them shelter, and then said, I give you this provided you tell me your stories. Put them in a diary, hid them in a cemetery. When the war was over, those words in that cemetery helped bring together hundreds of families. He helped sponsor Mrs. Tubman. He and a white man named Thomas Garrett got together and they helped fund Mrs. Tubman, the second Moses. But my great-grandmother said the slaves were forbidden to communicate at this time because of previous slave rebellions and uprisings, Nat Turner being one. So the slave owner made sure to tell the overseer to make sure you watch them in the fields. And then they had spies that were other slaves, spies that would listen even when they went home, because they worked from sun up, my great-grandmother said, to can't see. Sun up to can't see. My great-grandmother, when she was born, her father still acted as if it was slave times. They still picked cotton. She showed me the cuts in her hand from picking the cotton. So slavery was real to me. She said, I sang those songs because Negro spirituals were not just sorrow songs, songs that provided hope, that conveyed their sadness and their anger and their worriness, but also their faith. But they were also codes for escape, because they could not communicate others picking the cotton to one another, lest they be accused of trying to run away. So they disguised these codes in these songs, and they sang them so beautifully. They got the best singers to sing them, and the overseer never knew what was going on, sitting on the horse, just clapping his fingers, thinking, man, they sure love being slaves. Oh, I tell you, and they sure can sing. And while he's up there, they sure can sing. The next day, they was -1. The next day, they were -5. How did they do it? My great-grandmother said, she says, well, while the second Moses was hiding somewhere in the woods, it was conveyed that these singers would embed the codes in these songs. So as they're picking the cotton and they sing the song, and those who were designated to lead would just be listening. And so as they would sing, and they look at the overseer thought, well, they just happy being slaves. Well, would sing, let us break bread together on our knees. Let us break bread together on our knees. When I fall on my knees with my face to the rising sun, they knew I'm going to meet the second Moses at sunrise. All right, I'm going to keep listening. But then they would look out to the yonder and see what the seamstress who made a quilt for the mistress, and the seamstress took the quilt and laid it over the line, so as they're picking the cotton, they look at the quilt. But where the mistress thought it was just a quilt of nature, that is beautiful. Well, it was a quilt, but it was made of how to get off the plantation. It was a map that was embedded in the quilt. And all that those slaves who were designated to leave with the second Moses, they just memorized the map on the quilt. And when they held out the quilt, they memorized the map. Okay, when I get off the plantation, hang a right, go to the third tree, keep going, and sooner or later, that will take me, and then at night I can follow the North Star. That can take me to the big river. But they kept listening, so I know, meet the second Moses early in the morning. So then they came with the second song. Gonna lay down my burdens down by the riverside. So here we go. Early in the morning, down by the riverside. That's where the second Moses is going to be. But then they came with that other song. Where were they eventually going to go? Because the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act said that merely going to the northern states, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, and being free was not enough. Because the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act said that northerners were bound by law to work with slave catchers to return runaway slaves back to their masters. So they had to keep going north. So they came with a song to let that slave know, we're taking you somewhere. Don't get nervous, don't get afraid. Well, I'm on my way to the Canaan land, Canaan. They always use Israelite metaphors. Canaan land, Canaan, C-A-N-A-A-N. Canada, C-A-N-A-D-A. Y'all's going to Canada. Early in the morning, down by the riverside, you eventually are going to go to Canada. But when they were out running, there were some spies that were slaves that would run back to the master. They's leaving. Thank you. You get better rags tomorrow and more mush. Go get them. Get the bloodhounds. They sent the bloodhounds. So as the slaves are running, they don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. The bloodhounds are right on them with the overseer on the horse. So those in the field would just sing from the diaphragm, project the voice. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade. So, they get to the creek, and they get down into the water, because the water throws off the scent, so that the bloodhounds could not track them down. So as they're in the water, holding their breath, they pass. Then they continue to run, remembering the map on the quilt. They want to see this second Moses. They've heard all about her, but they want to see her. Is it really true? Does she really care enough to come back down into the bounds of slavery to free us's? And they run and they get to the big river, but they can't swim. But they said, well, I'm going to die trying, because I'd rather die trying to be free than to spend one more day on the plantation. So just as they're about to plunge into the water, and in the deep, deep river, they look up, and there's a canoe with a little lady on that canoe with a big gun. A big gun in case people start something. And two of her friends. So therefore, when the song comes, swing low, sweet chick, come on in closer, because I can't swim. And the chariot was the canoe. Well, I looked over Jordan. Jordan was the Ohio River. Well, I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? coming for to carry me home, a band of angels. Harriet Tubman and her two homies. Coming for to carry me home. So she said, David, that second Moses made 13 successful trips back and forth from the north to the south, and she saved 70 friends and family. David, that's love. Because if she was being selfish, she could have gone on and made a good living and just worried about herself, but she was worried about her neighbor. She said, John 15:13 says, greater love hath no man than to lay down his life for a friend. And that's what the second Moses did, David. And I don't ever want you to forget that second Moses, because the third Moses stands on the shoulders of the second Moses. She said, David, do you love me? I said, yes, ma'am. If you love me, I want you to memorize these speeches of a man that, I said, Mama, is it that man that, I was about 5 years old, and it was about 5 years since the third Moses was killed, if you're with me. And so I said, Mama, is that scary man's voice you play after church? And you sit back in your rocking chair and you hold a candle, and on the candle has some hands like this, and it's his same face. And in church, when you're deaconess, and I look at the fan, and in slow motion, I see the same man, a funeral advertisement on one side, and on the other side, the man is doing this. And then I said, and then at the barbershop, when I'm sitting in the big chair, but I'm not big enough to sit in the chair right, they put a board across the arms, and I sit there, and I'm looking up. He tells me to hold my head down, and I look up. Right above, right below the clock is a calendar, and it's the same man doing this. And I said, who is that man? Oh, baby, David. And I said, and when we go to the store, you say, I can get some candy when we're in the line, and I get candy, and I look, and on the magazine, it's him doing that again. Who is this man? Baby, that's the third Moses. That's Dr. Martin Luther King. He said things we never thought we had a right to think, let alone say. And David, before he died, he was trying to make sure that there would be no more poor people of all colors. The Poor People's Campaign. That was for red and yellow, black, brown, and white. David, he died so that all of us could be free. He tried to do what Jesus said in John 15:13. Greater love hath no man than to lay down his life for his friend. So David, do you love me? Yes, man. Learn his speeches and make the world remember what God did for this man, and that we are to love one another. So I want to share with you, when I was 1994, I had an opportunity to speak for Mrs. Rosa Parks on 2 occasions. And in 2008 for Mrs. Maya Angelou, Johnny Cochran, Julian Bond, James Merritt, many, many, many. And it's due to my great-grandmother inspiring me. I used to go to my library and rent out albums and books and take them to my office. My office was my treehouse. And I would go into my treehouse, and I would remember the book Negro in American History. And I'd see this pretty little lady being fingerprinted. Never, ever thought I would have the opportunity to not just perform for her, but spend 3 hours in a room with her, me, and my pianist. And all she did was have me sing spirituals to her and tell me what those spirituals meant to her. She said the night she was arrested, thrown into jail, the officers kept making fun of her and told her that they're going to kill her family. And they kept telling her that what she's doing is just going to be a disgrace to the whole Negro world and everything. And she felt like a slave. She said, I felt like nothing. But then she said, I remember that song my slave grandmama used to sing to me. She said, whenever you feel like you ain't nothing, understand Jesus died for you. And you are a child of the living God, just like everybody else. And her grandmother would say, and before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom, our favorite song. Oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. She told me I was supposed to do a speech for her in 1994 in the city of Linwood. They were naming the Linwood Metrolink in her honor, the Rosa Parks Metrolink system. So they called me on the city mayor, and people from the mayor's office said that we heard that you can really do Martin Luther King and sound like him. I said, sir, I tried. They said, well, we want you to come and do the I Have a Dream speech, thinking that that's the only speech Martin Luther King did. Those who really know King knows that he did some really, really good ones. And because of the tutelage of my great-grandmother, but because of the gifts and talents given from the Most High, and we all have gifts and talents. We just have to know what they are and use them for his glory. And so she told me, David, always use your gifts for his glory. So when they told me, we want you to do I Have a Dream speech, I said, okay. So when the day came and I hadn't met her yet, I was in the hotel room there, and this was in Fullerton. The first one was in Linwood, but the second one was in Fullerton. And the one in Linwood, I was waiting in the hotel, and she was in the green room. And they called me up to my room and said, Mrs. Parks is in the green room, and she would like to meet you and talk to you before the program. And I was really nervous because I thought about that St. Louis kid at 8 years old up in his office in the treehouse, looking at her and seeing her being fingerprinted, and now I'm getting ready to speak in front of her. I didn't feel worthy. I'm imitating her pastor, from the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. Who am I? So I was so nervous, and I thought all these words in my mind, all these speeches, word for word, how am I going to memorize them and just be calm when I see her? So I said, Lord, help me, help me. So I went down the elevator, and I got down, and as I was walking, I saw these big bodyguards, and I said, excuse me, where is Mrs. Parks? Oh, she's right in there. And I looked around because I guess I was trying to find somebody that was a woman of size, because of everything that she's done. I thought this would be a woman that was a bigger woman. A little old short lady that reminded me of my great-grandmother. And she had her back turned because she was eating up all the food. I couldn't believe it. All the grapes gone. All the cheese gone. No crackers for her brother. Nothing. She was eating it all. I said, they don't feed the mother of the movement? So as she was eating, I'm coming in, and her back is turned, and all I could see her is the back doing it. And her handler said, Mrs. Parks, this is the young man that's going to do the speech. And she turned around with her mouth filled with grapes and cheese and crackers. She put her finger up like, wait till she get it all down. She said, and in her Alabama accent, hi, baby. It reminded me of my great-grandmother. And it was as if my legs could not move. And I felt like Frankenstein. I was moving like this. And I said, can I come? Baby, come get me some sugar. And I walked over there and hugged her, and I whispered in her ear, thank you. All right, baby. Now I hear you going to sing the Black National Anthem. I said, yes, ma'am. And are you going to do a speech of my pastor? I said, yes, ma'am. And what speech you going to do? Just as I was going to say, I have a dream, she said, and please don't do I have a dream. I'm so tired of that speech. True story, true story. She said, my pastor was so much more than that speech. I am so tired of that speech. So I had to change the speech. And I ended up doing a speech to honor her called The Old Days. And when I did the speech, I didn't want to look at her because, what if I didn't sound like him or whatever? But they told me, man, look at her. I was looking up as I was doing the speech, and some people telling me and I looked, and she's just crying. And afterwards, she grabbed me by the arm, and she told me to ride in the limousine with her, and we went to the sponsor's home up in Anaheim Hills, and she said, I want some time with this young man. And everybody that was there that was invited to the big mansion home, they had to stay out, and we were in there for 3 hours. And she told me all kinds of stories about her pastor. Well, I went to commemorate her pastor. My aunt, my great aunt, I remember when I was about 9 or 10 years old. It was 10 years after Dr. King's assassination. And my grandfather took me over to his sister's home. And she said, David, I hear you doing all these speeches and you learning about Martin Luther King. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, I go up in the attic and I got something for you. Look in the footlocker. So I go up in the attic, open up the footlocker, and there was an obituary. And it said, Martin Luther King Jr., Atlanta, Georgia, April 9th, 1968. She had gone to the funeral 10 years before. She had driven down from St. Louis to go to the funeral. She said, David, and she had to be in her 60s at the time. She said, David, do you know Martin Luther King preached his own funeral? I said, now wait a minute. I knew my great aunt was getting up there in years. And I couldn't just say that because in those days, they go upside the head. There was no problem in the 70s. You couldn't say, oh, CPS? CPS what? You shouldn't have done what you did. So I made sure to get out of arm's length. And I said, Aunt Ursula, you know when you die, you can't talk, let alone preach your own funeral. She said, oh, you think I'm too old? I don't remember, huh? She says, well, you come by here next week and you come with the news and you'll tell me that I'm right. So I couldn't wait till Monday. When school was over, I ran to my library again. My card was tore up because I always used it. Gave my library card and they said, you know, you're going to need another one, right? I said, yeah. I didn't care. So I ran into the book section, the history section, and I looked. And then I found out. Well, now let's back it up 10 years later. I'm a freshman at Oakwood University in Huntsville, Alabama. And they want me, the people at our school is talking to Mrs. Coretta Scott King to see if I could speak for her, do a King speak for her if I sounded like her husband. But we were late getting out of Memphis, dropping off some of the choir in Huntsville, so we headed to Atlanta and we missed her by an hour. But I talked to some of those at the Ebenezer Baptist Church who were there on this particular day that proved my great aunt to be right. I talked to some of the seniors there, and I asked them about that day, February 4th, 1968. 2 months, 60 days to the day of Dr. King's assassination. 60 days. He was preaching at the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, his home church, where he was co-pastor with his father as the pastor. And he was preaching a sermon called The Drum Major Instinct, and how we as humans have a natural desire to be out front, to be first. But if we want to be Christ-like, we must serve. And true greatness comes by serving. So he tried to change the paradigm to say, be first in love, be first in peace, be first in righteousness. So the older lady said, child, he preached that morning. But then at the end, he started talking about his own death. We start wondering, what's he talking about? Child, 2 months later, he was dead. 5 days later, they had the funeral. And as his body is laying in state, and as they're preaching, they said at this moment, Dr. King will now preach his own eulogy. And the last part of the Drum Major Instinct, where Dr. King is speaking about his death, they recorded it, and they played it at his funeral. Thus the term, he preached his own eulogy. And I'd like for you to know just what manner of a man he was, why my great-grandmother loved him, what manner of a person she was, and what manner of a man I'm trying to be. Listen to the words as Dr. King is telling folk what he wanted to be remembered as. Paul said, I fought a good fight. This was Dr. King's version. He's finishing up the sermon, the Drum Major Instinct, and now he starts to talk about his own death. And it went like this.
You know, I guess we all think realistically about that day when we will be victimized at what is life's final common denominator. And that's something we call death. Never now and then I think about my own death, my own funeral. I don't think of it in a morbid sense, but every now and then I ask myself, what is it that I would once said? And I'll leave the word with you this morning. If any of you around when I have to meet my day, I don't want a long funeral. And if you get somebody to deliver the eulogy, tell them not to talk too long. Every now and then I'd wonder what I'd want them to say. Tell them not to mention that I have a Nobel Peace Prize. That isn't important. Tell them not to mention that I have 300 or 400 other awards. Tell them not to mention where I went to school. But I'd like somebody to mention that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. I'd like for somebody to say on that day that I did try to feed the hungry. I'd like for somebody to say on that day that I tried to be right on the war question. I'd like for somebody to say that day that I did try in my life to visit those who were in prison. I'd like for somebody to say on that day that I did try to clothe those who were naked. I'd like for somebody to say on that day that I tried to love and serve humanity. Yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. That I was a drum major for righteousness. And all of the other shallow things will not matter. I won't have any money to leave behind. I won't have none of the fine and luxurious things of life to leave behind. I just want to leave a committed life behind. And that's all I want to say. If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word of song, if I could show somebody he's traveling wrong, then my living will not be in vain. Or if I could do my duty as a Christian, Lord, bring salvation to a world once wrong. If I could spread the message as the Master taught, then my living will not be in vain.
2 months later, he was dead. But as I leave, as I close now, I like to close with one to charge everyone that God has given us all each gifts and talents to use for his glory. I'm a former probation correction officer over criminal youth. And I always would charge them. I would see so many gifts and talents that they had, but no one ever told them that they were gifted and talented. So therefore, they allowed the enemy to make them feel that they were nothing. So because of what I learned from my great-grandmother, stories of the Most High, stories of the only begotten, I knew to fill them up and encourage them, to let them know that they were bought with a price on Calvary's tree, that it was because of Jesus and his blood that they are there, and they have an opportunity to do something great once they realize what he's invested in them. And I say the same to you. So this last little short speech typifies how Dr. King is charging a group of Negroes, as we were called in those days. Black people were called Negroes in those days, and they were college students. And he was telling them that whatever God gives you to do, be your best. And what he said in 1966, I'm going to tell you in 2020. So as I'm speaking this, as he's speaking to a group of African-American young people, pretend as if he's speaking exactly to you. And use the words that he says and go out and do something great for God's glory by helping somebody else. How it went, it's called Be the Best at Whatever You Are. And I'll close with this.
Greatest challenge that we face is to be ready to enter these doors when they open. Ralph Waldo Emerson said in a lecture back in 1871, if a man can write a better book, preach a better sermon, or make a better mousetrap than his neighbor, even as he builds his house in the woods, the world will make a beaten path to his door. And this will become increasingly true. That means we're going to have to work hard. We're going to have to learn to burn the midnight oil sometime. Take advantages of new opportunities. No, we must not seek merely to do a good Negro job. If you're setting out to be merely a good Negro doctor, or a good Negro lawyer, or a good Negro preacher, or a good Negro teacher, or a good Negro barber, or a good Negro skilled laborer, or a good Negro beautician, then you have already flunked your matriculation exam for entrance into the University of Integration. We must get ready. We must set out to do our life's work so well that nobody can do it better. We must set out to do a good job, and to do that job so well that the living, the dead, or the unborn couldn't do it better. As I've said so often, if it falls your lot to be a street sweeper, go on out and sweep streets like Michelangelo carved marble. Sweep streets like Raphael painted pictures. Sweep streets like Beethoven composed music, and like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep streets so well that all the host of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived the world's best street sweeper who swept his job well. This is it. Whoa, if you can't be a pine on the top of a hill, be a scrub in the valley, but be the best little scrub on the side of that reel. Can't be a tree, then you be a bush. Can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be the sun, be a star. For it isn't by size that you win or you fail. Be the best at whatever you are.
I want to thank you for having me. I have CDs and DVDs of speeches and songs for $10 a piece. I take credit cards, debit cards, cash, whatever. If you want to give me the house, whatever, I'll take it. But thank you so much, Pastor, for having me. Thank you, Sister Edward, for having me. You all are wonderful, and everything that I do is for the glory of the Most High and His only begotten. Thank you, and may God bless you.